And hello, welcome back to Golden Creatives Talk, the podcast where we have insightful, multidimensional conversations with inspiring Black and Brown creatives about their journey, their craft, and the narratives they are building. I'm your host, CT Luna, and today's guest is the living embodiment of that concept. She is a media maven who has spent decades shaping identity and showcasing Black and Brown excellence for a generation of Black, Brown, and Golden multidimensionals. Amy Dubois Barnett is here with us today. She is the former editor in chief of Essence, Ebony, and Honey magazines. She has commanded the glossy era of publishing from the highest echelons. And today, we're talking about an equally powerful and arguably most personal transition from the editor in chief's office to the author's desk. Her debut novel, If I Ruled the World, is a high stakes journey into the heart of the publishing industry told through a biracial lens that is both sharp and soulful. Please welcome the incomparable Amy Dubois Barnett. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you.
How are
Thank
you
you so
this
much for
morning?
having me. Thank you so much for having me. I am
Yes, and
doing
thank you
very
so
well this
much.
morning.
Thank you so
Getting
much
excited
for
for my
waking
book
up so
launch.
early. Yes,
Oh, no
yes.
worries. I love it. I love it. I have so much to do. I'm in preparations now for my book launch on January 27th, and I'm heading out on tour. So I will be heading out in about a week. I know.
Yay. Okay, I'll be asking you about your tour later. So excited to have you here. I have 1,000,005 questions, and I wanted to get started with you before we start talking about this book. Tell us a little bit about your background. Where are you really from, as it were?
Understood. Well, I have had a what can only be described, I guess, as an anomalous, both an anomalous and peripatetic background. So I am from New York. That is what I lived in New York most of my life. I hit puberty in New York, and my theory is wherever you hit puberty is where you're from, right? So
Okay.
I'm definitely a New Yorker. But technically, I've lived in 13 cities on 3 continents. Um, I was born in Chicago because both of my parents were getting their respective PhDs at the University of Chicago. And our first international stop was in India, where they were both where they were doing their respective dissertation research, and so that was the
Mm-hmm.
first kind of my first experience living internationally. And then I kind of continued that again, very anomalous experience where I grew up mostly on university campuses, largely
Mm-hmm.
because my mom worked in academia and eventually became a university president. So we moved around to those campuses. And then my life was also shaped by the fact that I went to French school when I was very young.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was pretty much fluent in French by the time I was 11. And then I went to the United Nations International School in New York. And so, I have this sort of interesting experience in that I'm very firmly rooted in the Black community.
Yeah.
That is my core identity. I've never thought about myself as anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at the same time, I've had all these international experiences and things that have taken me outside of what is traditionally Black culture, and so I've been able to really sort of experience things that are far afield from the sort of box that people like to put us in. And
Mm-hmm.
right now, I'm Los Angeles based, so I've lived all over this country.
Wow. There are so many parallels. I've also had an international background, and I totally get the identification with being Black, but also realizing that you're in environments that are probably a lot more blended and where you might be, one of the few, if not the
Mhm.
only in the room. So wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. So I think it's probably every young girl writer's dream to head up a magazine, and a fashion magazine, no less. At least that was my dream when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s. How did you score that opportunity?
Oh my gosh. Well, I came into media in a very circuitous way. So, um, I I actually started my career in finance. I thought I was going to I was going to go work on Wall Street for a couple of years, and then
Uh-huh.
go to law school, become a lawyer. Because law school was sort of like the repository for liberal arts smart kids who didn't know what they wanted to do with their lives.
Right.
Um, but I always loved writing. That was my biggest passion, but it wasn't particularly encouraged in my family. Nobody thought that it was going to be a stable career for me, et cetera. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, after I discovered that finance was really not my spiritual home, I worked in fashion very briefly. I got a certificate in fashion merchandising, and then after I graduated from college, and then I worked as an assistant buyer at a department store in New York City. But just couldn't shake the writing bug. And so I
Mm-hmm.
ended up moving to Ireland for a year, preparing a portfolio, got into an MFA program at Columbia. And when I moved back and started the program, I was super excited, but I also needed to, like eat and have a roof over my head, like stuff like that. So I leveraged my background um, in fashion and got a job
Mm-hmm.
working as an editor at a fashion website.
Mm-hmm.
And the owner of that fashion website started a magazine, which seems like a reverse migration today, but at the time it was an incredibly prestigious thing, to be
Mm-hmm.
working at this glossy magazine. And so I did that while I was in grad school. And then my first big sort of magazine opportunity came after I won a fiction award when I was
Mm-hmm.
in grad school for a short story that I wrote. And the person who presented the award to me was the then editor in chief of Essence magazine.
Oh.
And so when we stayed in touch, and after I graduated, I sort of then like leveraged that fashion experience and the experience that I also had working for the fashion website and magazine. And she offered me the position of fashion and beauty features editor at Essence. And that started a career, 20-year, approximately career in media and in magazines.
Very, very cool. Just a side question. This is not on script, but did your language, I'm assuming that you learned languages at the UN International School and earlier, did that help at all, or did that not really help at all?
Well, I was fluent in French.
Uh-huh.
And it helped somewhat because actually the owner of the first fashion magazine that I worked was Italian, and so I don't particularly know a lot of it. I have words in Italian, but I could,
Right.
say, but ragazzo,
Right.
and he was impressed with the French. Um, it was intermittently useful at varying points in my career. But if
Hmm.
I'm honest, it was more of a party trick, to impress the snobby people.
Gotcha and gotcha.
Right.
Okay, so now we've moved into you being at the helm of the most influential magazines in the world, and certainly the most influential magazine, women of color, readers of color. How did that leadership role shape your understanding of how Black and biracial identities are represented in the media, and the extent to which you could influence those norms?
So my experience as an editor in chief um, was amazing. So I was at Essence Magazine as the fashion and beauty features editor, and then the lifestyle editor. And
Mhm,
then I became editor in chief of Honey Magazine, which was
mhm,
a magazine for urban women. And then I was editor in chief of Teen People, where I was the first Black woman to be editor in chief
that's right.
of a major mainstream magazine. And then I was editor in chief. No, gosh, what happened after that? Deputy editor in chief of Harper's Bazaar, and then
Mhm,
editor in chief of Ebony Magazine. So and then I moved into the digital sphere where I ran a bunch of digital brands for various larger media companies. Um, so I had this wonderful experience, running Honey Magazine, Ebony Magazine, Teen People. So this is urban women, it's African Americans, it's teens, and then Harper's Bazaar is kind of high end mainstream. And I my through line in all of that was really loving to tell the stories of communities that I care about, underrepresented
Mm-hmm.
communities, women, vulnerable communities. And I was doing so as a Black woman who happens to have a white father, but
Mm-hmm.
and it really made me understand the incredible power behind the opportunity to tell our stories, behind the
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to inform and empower and also entertain, and
Mm-hmm.
being able to talk to these specific audiences as a Black woman, helped me to not just be empathetic, but also to identify what were the issues that were most important to us.
Right.
What were the social issues? What were the political issues? What were the entertainers? Who were the entertainers? And then imbue all of that with smarts, but also humor, so that people could really hear
Right.
it. So it was a culturally powerful place for my career has been, I guess, culturally powerful, and for that
Mm-hmm.
I'm incredibly grateful.
Okay, so actually, I think we're segueing beautifully into talking about your debut novel, If I Ruled the World. Let's see, I've got a graphic here that I can put up, and I'm gonna just pop it over to your side of the screen. It's very tiny. So it's coming out this Tuesday, the 20, is it this Tuesday, the 27th?
It is January
I think
27th. It's available for pre-order now, but it is
this
coming out on January 27th.
is. Excellent. So give us a quick blurb or rundown of the book. And while you do that, I've put up a QR code so people can pre-order. That goes to your imprints page. So
Oh, amazing,
there you
amazing. Yes, I'm
go.
going to point to it. Yes, please pre-order.
Pre-order. Pre-order now.
So,
There we go.
pre-order now. Um, so, If I Rule the World is it's set in New York City in the late 1990s, early 2000s, really at the intersection of music and magazines and also style. And this is, of course, a world that I know better than almost anyone, because this is the era in which I cut my teeth, as a
Hmm.
woman,
Hmm.
because I was in my 20s in the 90s, as and also as an editor in chief, because I became an editor in chief for the first time when I was 30 years old. And in my novel, we follow my protagonist, Nikki Rose, on an incredible journey. We first meet her,
Hmm.
and she is an editor of a high-end fashion magazine, but she desperately wants to be an editor in chief. And so we follow her as she eventually becomes editor in chief of a magazine called Sugar. And we see how challenging it is, the complexities of being an ambitious woman of color in that era. The misogyny she was contending with, the sexual
Hmm.
harassment and sexual violence she was contending with. She's got powerful enemies. She's working in an industry that is questioning, her authenticity. They don't, she's at once too Black for her mainstream magazine, fashion colleagues. But then she goes over to Sugar Magazine, and they question whether she has enough, cred to really hang and really represent this urban brand. And so she is experiencing some challenges within this cultural schism, and also as she navigates again the misogyny, the powerful enemies, and everything that's leading her toward her dream. So we watch this journey, as she makes mistakes. She's messy. She is far from perfect. But I think it's ultimately very inspirational, because when she comes into her own voice, that's when everything, sort of comes together in her life, her professional dreams, love, her friendships.
Awesome. Wow, you captured so much more than your blurb. Would you mind reading a passage? Is there a passage that kind of captures some of this vibe? There are a couple
Ooh,
that
I
I
mean, I could read a little bit of the prologue. Would that work?
sure. Yeah,
Maybe um, I'll just read a couple pages of the prologue.
that's awesome. Yeah.
Okay, great. Um, so New York City, spring 1996. I was a live for the moment 20 something, like every other 20 something I knew, until one rainy Friday night in the Krispy Kreme on 23rd Street in Manhattan. I was licking raspberry jelly from the fingers of a very rich, very fine, and very married man when I looked up to see my parents, shaking rain off their huge umbrella and laughing. I might have been able to salvage the situation if my date, his trademark salt and pepper locks unmistakable from every angle, had been a stranger to my parents of no such luck. He was my mother's childhood friend from suburban Chicago. The bond they formed as the stray chocolate chips in their high school's huge snickerdoodle had lasted decades, with my mom even toasting the brides at both his first and second weddings. Dad spoke first, an uncharacteristic curse word exploding from his mouth. What the fuck is this, Al? My date, Alonzo Griffin, husband, father, and until that moment oblivious finger suckee, had his back to the door, but he whipped around at the sound of my dad's voice. Jesus, what are you two doing here? He asked, the slight tremor in his voice belying his expressionless face. Getting a donut, I think, I whispered, shocked into stupidity. No shit, Nikki, Alonzo said. He looked at Mom and implored, Anne, please. Hearing her name thawed my frozen mother, who strode over to our table and poked a finger in Alonzo's chest. In a furious tone, she said, How could you, Al? This is my daughter. Alonzo winced, but clearly thought better of rebutting my enraged mom. Annie, he spoke in a low tone, my mother's name both a question and a warning. Don't call me that, she snapped. Then she turned to me. And you, what were you thinking? Tell me, please, what were you thinking? I had no response because I honestly hadn't been thinking at all, unless a torrid affair with my married boss, who was twice my age and just happened to grow up with my mother, was evidence of deep consideration. The situation was made worse by the fact that 6 months prior, my mom had called Alonzo, the publisher of Revolutions, a venerable music magazine owned by the even more venerable Park Avenue Publishing, to ask him for help with her wayward daughter. Black folks rarely make it to the top, so you'll likely get stuck near the bottom where the salaries are dreadful. And most magazines are asinine anyway, she'd wailed, when I first brought up my dream of being an editor-in-chief. After I graduated from college, my English professor mom had begged me to find a job in a respectable and secure field, and in her mind, journalism, even as an EIC, did not qualify. But after watching me quit a job in finance, drop out of law school, then waitress while trying to get someone to pay me for my words, I think she began to fear I'd never move out of their Harlem brownstone. What Mom and Dad didn't know was that during my interview process, Alonzo and I had gone out for drinks. One thing led to another, and I'd found myself in a discreet midtown hotel watching my mom's old pal unlace his Ferragamo shoes, peel off his Armani suit, and unbutton his Valentino shirt. I'd made love to a few boyfriends by then, but this was something different. Alonzo Griffin had pulled my hair and grabbed my throat and bent me over every piece of furniture in the hotel room, all while whispering he was going to enjoy taking care of his good little bitch. As we were getting dressed afterward, Alonzo had tilted my head up to look into my eyes. Baby girl, keep this up and you'll be editor-in-chief in no time, he'd said with a smirk. But next time I see you, Daddy wants you to have a Brazilian wax. It looks like you sat on a fucking chia pet.
Wow.
It's a spicy beginning.
It is a very spicy beginning. And yeah, so Nikki Rose is the protagonist. Like you, she's biracial. And in your novel, she's told that Black girls don't sell magazines. And I think it was actually the title of one of your Substacks as well. So, and I think you even mentioned in that Substack that this is what you were told back in the day. So I guess what we all want to know is how much of your novel is based on your own real life experience.
I know I'm really stealing myself for getting this question a lot, and I understand why. I mean, there are huge similarities between my protagonist and myself, and I absolutely get it. But I can tell you, this is not a roman à clef. This is not my story at all. It's rooted in a world that I know better than almost anyone, and it's inspired by many of my experiences or things that I observed during this time, or just my understanding of what was happening in the culture during this time.
Right.
But aside from maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 little anecdotes that I pulled from real life and kind of plopped, like small moments that I plopped into the book. One of them being
Mhm.
somebody did tell me at one point, Black girls don't sell. Aside from that, this entire book is fictionalized. Nothing that happened to Nikki Rose happened to me in my real life.
Okay. Okay. Damn. Just so we thought we were gonna get all of the spicy secrets.
I know, I know, I know. I'm halfway debating just being like, yeah, it's my story. so, so everybody could like ask me, oh, who's Alonzo? Who's.
Who was Alonzo? We all want to know.
Right.
Oh, okay, so this takes place in 1999. I have some memories of 1999. What did you want to make sure was part of Nikki's world in this book?
Um, I thought it was very important that we adequately represent, or I adequately represent, really the vibe of the time. You know what I mean? Like it's such a
Mhm.
very specific moment in cultural history. It's one of our most important cultural eras, and I wanted to be sure that it felt authentic. That you really got a behind the scenes picture of what it was like to be a woman in that era and what it felt like to exist in these incredibly fun and sexy and glamorous times under which lurked extreme violence. And it was a very
Yeah.
perilous time, actually, to be a woman, and certainly an ambitious woman. And I really wanted that feeling in the book, and I also wanted the feeling of what it was like to work in magazines that era.
Right.
This is set in the heyday of magazines, when they were of
Mhm.
incredible cultural importance. A cover could make or break somebody, a star.
Mhm.
And there was so much excitement and glamour and energy, and also tension and stress, and that kind
Mhm.
of went into magazine making. And I wanted to showcase that a little bit as well. So my protagonist is having a great time. She's enjoying being in this fun cultural moment, but she's
Yeah.
also contending with a lot of the dangerous aspects of being there, all while she's working in this very heady professional environment. First as in a fashion magazine, and then as the editor in chief of a magazine she's really trying to put on the map.
Right. And there, from what I recall of 1999, which is more than 25 years ago, it was a very like, who knows what will happen in that pivot to 2000, was this sort of like, you only live once vibe. At least it felt very exciting to me in those days as well.
Oh yeah, we weren't
um,
partying like it's 1999 because
Yes, we were. We totally were, and I think there was also like a revival of that Prince song. So like, yeah, it was good times, good
it was
times.
good
But yeah,
times.
there
It
were
was
dark times too. Okay, so in my work, I talk about golden multidimensionality and my own personal journey to sort of move outside of existing in that racial binary. What was Nikki's journey in If I Ruled the World? Or why was it important for you to give this character a biracial lens while navigating the world of New York publishing?
um, that was something that I was interested in writing about from a personal perspective, because again, I
Hmm.
am a Black woman with a white father, right? And
Hmm.
so um, I I was interested in writing about it in a writing about being biracial in a more complex and nuanced way. This is not a character, my protagonist, who feels like torn between worlds, like, am I white, am I Black? Like, this is not her identity at all.
Hmm.
um, so she's experiencing her race and in a very, again, complicated way in these
Yeah.
environments, where she's being questioned everywhere,
Yeah.
even though she feels very rooted in who she is. And
Hmm.
I thought that, in addition to that being just something that I was interested in exploring
Yeah.
from a literary perspective, given my own background, I also thought it was emblematic of the way in which she moved through different kind of worlds, right? She was in this very high end, very white fashion world, and that we see her move into a more urban and black world professionally at Sugar Magazine. Now, she grew up in Harlem, so she wasn't this as if she were just unfamiliar with. I mean, she grew up in a black environment, but working in at an urban kind of music and lifestyle magazine for women is much different
Yeah.
than working for a high-end white, if you will, mainstream fashion magazine. And so that kind of, again, fluidity between cultures, I thought was also kind of represented in her biraciality.
Very, very cool. And actually, it seems like a nice portrayal to have in a time where self-definition of identity is being very, very much challenged right now in the environment. And so I think some of what you're talking about, I'm looking forward to reading your story to see, if there are any moments that I can relate with as well, growing up in that time, not in the fashion world of New York City, but definitely just to see if I can see elements that I can identify with
Well,
or
Nikki's
that.
very relatable. She was a fish out of water in both environments for different reasons, right?
Mhm.
She was a fish out of water at the fashion magazine where she worked, in part because her colleagues considered her to be too black or didn't like her, sort of more ideas about people of color, but also because
Right,
she's blurred. She
right.
was very bookish. She was very awkward for a lot of years,
Mm.
and she was living this life even as when she was young. She was living in Harlem, but she was commuting down to the Upper East Side to go to high school. I mean, she has contended with being a bit of a fish out of water, in many of her environments for her
Yeah.
entire life. People in Harlem sort of deriding her for going to her fancy, private school, and people at her
Mhm.
fancy private school like, "Oh, you live in Harlem," and
Yeah.
this sort of continued, throughout her journey.
Yeah. Um, was there a specific chapter that was really difficult to write for you?
Um, there were specific moments in the book that were difficult to write,
Mhm.
just as I was exploring what
Like the
the
prologue?
character. Well, no, the prologue was fun to write.
Okay.
I have no issue with writing spicy scenes.
Uh,
No, that was a little less. It wasn't as difficult, but there are emotionally very fraught moments that my character goes through that my heart was bleeding for her. When she,
mm,
has a falling out with her best friends, for example, and her best friends were all mad at her, and even as she was going through things, she didn't have people to reach out to. My heart was bleeding for my character. There were scenes of sexual violence, where my heart was bleeding for her. So those kinds of scenes I thought were difficult to write.
mhm. Well, you mentioned the word bleed. They say authors bleed into their first novels. Was there a part of your own journey, or a part of the book that was really cathartic for you to write about, or that you could kind of have your moment of release and this is what this is all about?
That's such a good question. There were moments I love to write, and I can't wait for people to read, that are sort of centered in empowerment, like female empowerment. I mean, this is a
Mhm,
very juicy read. This is
mhm,
if I must say, my book's a page turner, and I was very intentional about writing it that way. I wanted to be like a fun, kind of, snappy read, but I also wanted there to be very serious themes that were explored, and ideas put
mhm,
forth. And so the moments of female empowerment, when she has revelations about herself and she comes into her own
mm,
power, when she gets
mhm,
comfortable in her own skin, when she makes peace fragile piece with a female adversary, when she, makes, friendships and has conversations with her new friendships, and has conversations with her older, or longtime friends.
Yeah.
That for me was just sort of wonderful to write. And then, there were, I would say, a couple of moments in the book. You remember I said I pulled maybe 3 or 4 sort of like smaller anecdotes, from real life, and plopped them into the book. And there were sort of 2 in particular that I really enjoyed being able to sort of write out of my life. You know what I mean? And one was certainly that moment when my protagonist boss tells her, that Black girls don't sell magazines. That actually did happen to me, where my boss, the Italian gentleman from the first fashion magazine I ever worked, did the same thing to me, sort of smoking in his office as I was proposing, various Black models for the cover. He's like, I mean, Black girls don't sell magazines.
With the accent.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess you're talking about that. It is a catharsis, right? You're talking about being able to process moments and kind of process them by putting them on the page. And I think that's what I feel with writing as well. So we are transitioning into this section of questions about creative authority versus creative vulnerability. Sort of you spend being the boss, the editor in chief, making those editorial decisions. And how did it feel to step into the role of debut author, which is a very different world. I mean, it's a world where you're on the other side of the desk. You're scrutinizing your work, knowing that it's being scrutinized by editors and a publishing house, agents. Um, what was that? What was that transition like for you?
To be honest, it's been really seamless. I mean, in my 20s, I took so many writing workshops leading up
Mhm.
to the year I spent in Ireland studying writing and literature, and then the 2.5 years, because I got a fellowship, that I spent getting my MFA in writing. So during all of that period of time, my my fiction was workshopped so many times.
Mhm.
And so you
Mhm.
really start to develop a little bit more of a thick skin. Like, I really understand what it's like to be edited, and I welcome it. I'm like, please make my words better. And then I spent, many years as an editor. So,
Yeah.
I'm also very aware that editing functions to make your words better. I think that a lot of people
Yeah.
resist editing. A lot of people resist editing, and I don't understand it. I'm like, please edit me. Please, everybody needs an editor. There's nobody
Mhm.
who doesn't need an editor. And so I actually really welcome people kind of scrutinizing my work, because I know it will be for its betterment.
Yeah. Well, great. So, well, for better or for worse, I took the self-publishing path with Brown Beyond Borders to maintain my narrative agency. By the way, my book hit top 10 on the Amazon bestsellers in the mixed heritage and biracial category yesterday.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh,
It's still,
congratulations.
yes, I'm like gobsmacked, but but side note, you've navigated the traditional world with your earlier nonfiction piece and now this novel. Was there anything about the business of books and publishing in 2026, 2025 versus decades ago that surprised you? What was there something new?
It's hard to say, because when I published my nonfiction book, I was at such a different place in my life. And I
Hmm.
really don't think I properly understood how much of the success of the book was on me as the author,
Mm.
and what that really takes, the amount of work it takes, the amount of strategy, the amount of of intentional energy. I mean, it's an incredible amount of work, and I don't think I really understood that then. And also I had a new baby and I was, I think I think I was just in a very different moment of my
Yeah.
life where I was involved in the book, of course, and it's a book it's an NAACP Image Award nominated advice book for women. So I was very involved and it was very meaningful to me. But the way that I'm approaching the rollout for my novel is just so very different than the way that I approached everything
Mhm.
back then. Like I'm different, and my approach again is kind of almost a 180. So I can't really evaluate the business on a certain level because I'm thinking about it in such a different way now.
Really interesting. So when you write questions, maybe it's the same for you. When I write questions for these kinds of interviews, sometimes I feel like I can anticipate what the answer will be. I did not anticipate that answer like at all. I was expecting you to mention something like, oh, like social media
Social
barely existed in those
media and
days, right?
digital
So
marketing and right,
totally.
exactly. I mean, but that's the obvious stuff. Yes, clearly,
Yeah,
all
yeah,
those things are all very, very obvious. There's earned media, there's owned media, there's
yeah,
paid media, and the owned media now, although social's not really owned, but from a brand perspective, I mean, you have to kind
yeah.
of go hard on that, so I went hard on owned. I've gone hard on earned through all of my contacts. The paid is over with my publisher, but it's true. I mean, there's a much different kind of way of approaching these things where you flow, books through influencers and try to get them to talk
Yeah.
about your books on Book Talk on TikTok. I mean, there's a lot of different there's none of that existed when I first published,
Yeah.
my advice book. And so
Yeah.
now it is a very, very different game. But I'm a different
So
player.
now, okay, great. So now that we're on the social media tip, um, I guess you're going to launch your book tour, virtual and real book tour, starting on Tuesday next week. Is that
Yes, I mean,
correct?
my press has started.
Yeah.
But in New York City, I'm starting to do a significant press on January 23rd, but the first major event, or my book comes out on January 27th. So I will be having an event that evening with press that day and the day before. And then the day after my book comes out, I will be on Good Morning America on the 28th. And then I will leave I guess on the 29th, and for the rest of my book tour legs.
Any book signings happening in the New York City area or LA, or things that readers can, connect with you, get your book and get it signed?
Oh yes, I would love for you guys to meet me on tour. I've got a tour schedule posted on my Instagram, which is at Amy Dubois Barnett. That's I say .com at Amy Dubois Barnett. And you can also go to my site, amyduboisbarnett.com. But and my tour starts on the 27th in New York City. I will be at the Greenlight Bookstore in Brooklyn that evening. So there's a link to register for that. I would love to see you there. And then after that, I go to Atlanta, Cleveland, Houston, back to LA. I'm in Los Angeles on February 4th. I'm in Atlanta on January 29th. I'm in Cleveland on January 31st. I'm in Houston on February 3rd, and then back in LA on February 4th. And then I've got a second event in LA on February 11th. And then I'm back in Philadelphia on February 24th.
I don't know how you kept all of that in your head, but that is pretty rock star.
Man, as
Um,
I told you, the game is different, but I am a different player now.
yeah, yeah, impressive. I feel like you're edging into the topic of just sort of presence and maybe knowing yourself better
Mhm.
than back then. Yeah,
Well,
that's
I'm
a
in my
vibe I'm
50s
getting.
now. I mean,
You would
this
hope
is a.
so.
So I'm sorry.
I said you would hope so that with
Oh, yeah,
with
right, exactly.
age
So yeah,
that
you would hope that I would have learned a couple few things over the course of these many years. So yeah, but I'm just honestly, this whole thing is, I mean, it's, this book is a dream come true. I mean, this is my
Yeah.
original dream. When I got my MFA in creative writing in my 20s, that's what I wanted to do with my life. I was like, oh, I'm going to be a novelist. I'm going to write the great American novel. This is what I'm going to do. And then I don't want to say got pulled into, because I love my career, but I started down the path of a media career, and it turned out to be something that I both love and was really good at, because I'm
Mm-hmm.
very dichotomous. I'm creative in business, but
Yeah.
also textual and visual. And so
Yeah.
making magazines really gives you an opportunity to do both.
Yeah.
So I'm incredibly proud of the way in which I've represented the Black community, in the way in which I've told women's stories, and the way I've empowered teenagers, and everything I've done along the way. But this novel, I mean, this is my original dream.
Yes.
And I actually started this book when I was editor in chief of Teen People. I put it down for many years because I didn't have the bandwidth, the creative bandwidth to
Right.
finish it. But all of a sudden, when I picked it back up, the story felt more urgent than ever, and I had a different perspective on it. And I'm just um, excited for everybody to read it, and I'm proud of myself for putting it out there.
I am extremely proud of you. I've seen you writing somewhere that it took you about 20 years to write it, but you're also a writer. So I know that that's kind of like a half truth. That is, when you finally had that moment of this book needs to be written and it needs to be written now. When was that? Was that a year ago? Was that 2 years ago? Like, how long did it take when you finally said, "Yep, this is it. This is the time," and you just kind of wrote
Right.
it, sat down?
Well, book publishing, traditional book publishing is slow, right?
Yeah.
So, there a year ago would be a book that's coming out in 28. But when I left corporate media, and I picked up the book again, I just sort of looked at the 100 pages that I had, because I wrote about 100
Hmm.
pages, back in the day. And
Hmm.
I looked at them, and I was just like, oh God, this story will not leave my heart. It won't
Yeah.
leave. And I rethought, what I'd written before. And I realized that this, it wasn't just a story about a plucky sort of, young woman who's finding her voice and becoming an editor in chief, the job of her dreams. I was like, actually, this is a much deeper story,
Yeah.
about a woman who is coming into her own voice and feeling her own power, and trying to understand, the cost of the price of ambition, and figuring out how she's going to exist in a world that prioritizes and values her relative attractiveness. But
Hmm.
she's also being, dismissed in this misogynist environment. And when
Yeah.
I realized it's those themes I wanted to explore, it just felt incredibly urgent, and I had to
Yeah.
write it. So this was 2023, and
Yeah.
I, rewrote everything that I had. I redid everything, and finished it in 20 that year.
Yep.
And it went to auction at the top of 2024. So that's when
Hmm.
I got my book deal.
And then the traditional publishing process kind of kicks in, and that takes its own
I mean, it's
timing.
2026, and that's when my book is
Yeah.
coming. Like that's what it is.
So there you have it, folks. No, but actually, the reason why I ask is because I've discovered, first of all, I've got a couple of, fiction works that I've kind of like put in a drawer because they never really felt like the time was right, or it felt like it was a slog. That's kind of why I'm asking. And even this book, I had started writing it in, I think it was 2015, and then it kind of like went in a drawer, and then I'd pick it up again. And there were so many moments where it didn't feel right,
Mm,
until I think 2024, same thing, 2024, when it just started to like, oh, these are the themes that I need to address.
right.
And I guess what I'm getting at is, um, creativity has a way of kind of like telling you when you're ready for her.
Mm. I
um,
partially I believe that, and I believe in kind of, you know, when a story feels urgent is when you have to tell it. But then there's
Yeah.
also just the work of writing. I mean, I think what
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
don't also understand, I mean, just people who have not written a book, is that a lot of it is just putting your ass in the seat, whether you
Yes.
want to or not, whether you're
Yes.
inspired or not,
Yes.
and just doing it, like
Yeah.
there it is, it is. I mean, writing is not the sort of like magical sort of fairy thing where like the words just come to you as sparkly over your head. Like, no, like some of it is actually like you are like, okay,
A
how do I
grind.
construct the seed? You know what I mean? Like how, like, how do I actually do this? Like there's a, it's some of it is really just whether you want to or not,
Yes.
kind of putting your tush in the seat, opening your computer or your notebook or wherever it is you write,
Hmm.
and getting her done.
Yeah. Okay. So we're nearing the close. Um, I'm trying to pick my favorite question. On the show, we do talk about golden multidimensionality, extending your self definition beyond one dimensional labels. As you reflected on Nikki Rose's character arc in your book, were you reminded of times when you tapped into your own golden multidimensionality as a superpower?
Um, I, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. There is, of course, the challenge sometimes of, like my protagonist, feeling like a fish out of water or
Hmm.
being judged for your relative authenticity in environments where that is, perhaps not fair, Um, um, on the other hand, there is something very special about having a set of experiences that are anomalous,
Yeah.
they're, sort of having this ability to um, to have intimate relationships, with people of different races, and
Yeah.
really experiencing that kind of, my dad is a white man, right? And
Hmm.
so loving my father,
Hmm.
um, it gives me sort of an organic ability to relate to people of all races, frankly,
Yeah.
because it doesn't feel unfamiliar to me to have that kind
Yeah.
of, intimate personal, relationship, with somebody who is not Black.
Right.
And so that kind of increased my empathy
Yeah.
and the breadth of my perspective and probably my intuition, as well. So I really appreciated having that.
Yeah.
Um, that is real.
You are a code switching master.
You
Um,
don't even know. You don't even know. We ain't even talked about it.
we
Not really.
haven't talked about it. No, I'll just have to have you on the show one more time.
Right. You'll just have to read my
Um,
book.
yeah, well, that too. I'm gonna read it. I ordered it. I pre-ordered, so I'm expecting it to drop into my Kindle like on Tuesday.
Yay.
Yay. Okay, I think I saw a little something about a two-book deal. So what's next? Are we seeing Nikki Rose doing things, or are we looking at another novel and a new protagonist? What's
It's another novel and a new protagonist. So
okay?
it's a completely different story, that I'm excited about. And I've started working on it. So, I want to get through my book tour and then I'm going to turn my attention back to novel number two.
I feel that. Okay, last question. If you could rule the world for one day and change one thing, what would it be?
The current administration in the United States of America.
Yeah. That was easy. Okay, thanks so much for including Golden Creatives Talk on your book tour, Amy. And thank you so much for joining us on Golden Creatives Talk today with Amy Dubois Barnett. Her book, If I Rule the World, comes out this Tuesday. I've pre ordered mine and I can't wait to get my hands on it. Next week, Friday, we've got Kim Golden, USA Today best-selling romance author, join us here for that conversation. But in the meantime, pre-order Amy's book that way and start reading it. And then I'll see you next week, Friday. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you,
Thank you so much for
Amy.
having me. This is a great conversation.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.